Hey, it's Mr. A. Welcome back to another art video. Today we're going to dive right into this new set of Prismacolor Premier colored pencils. These are my favorite. Nice and smooth, rich colors. Spice up any colored pencil design, take it to the next level. In this video, we're going to make sure you're getting the most out of your colored pencils. We're going to start with how to sharpen the tip, and we'll end up with a grip, and make sure your drawings are on point. Few things we need to think about is starting off with a sharpened pencil. Now there's a couple ways you can achieve this. Number one is through using a standard hand sharpener or an electronic or crank one. I like these the best, especially when I have expensive colored pencils. I don't want to waste any of the lead that I paid a lot of money for. So what I'm going to use also to assist me is some type of X-Acto knife or razor blade. This can help me shape the tip of my pencil, which you'll see later, into whatever I need. Now, when you get them out of the box, you'll notice that this cone that is created is a little bit shorter than one that would happen off of something like this. I think they just do that for aesthetic reasons, but a lot of times when we get a regular pencil, you'll notice that the cone is a little bit longer. What that allows us to do is use the side of the lead. This is a really important feature. So even though I could start with this, I'm going to get limited pretty quickly, and you'll see. Let me start pressing down. Now when I start making lines, I want to make sure that I understand the basic concept of a pencil. First of all, what's happening when I make a line like this? Well, first of all, let's take a look at the lines themselves. This one is by far the thinnest, but by the time I get to the end, it's way thicker. So if I look at the actual tip of the pencil, you'll be able to see the change in shape. It's no longer pointy. It has an angle on the top. Each stroke of the pencil grinds away a certain amount of the pigment and leaves it on the paper. That's why we need to resharpen the pencil. Now this might seem obvious, but the thing is that every time we press harder, it gets thicker because it's using a bigger part of the cone. So if you think of it this way, here's my pencil lead. Up here, what type of line is it? It would be a very thin line. But if I started and I ground it down to here, the line is going to be much thicker. If I go all the way down to where that wood is, this is going to give me a really fat line, the whole width of this cone. So I want to be careful what aspect of this thing I'm using. Now it doesn't have to just be a cone. We can actually purposefully draw on one side of the piece. Now here we have a limited way to do that. It's too short. So if I sharpen it in a normal sharpener, you're going to see how that changes, and it gives me a few more options as to how to shade with the side of the pencil. Given this cone, you can notice that from here to here I have a much wider area, so this whole length is going to be used for shading. That's going to be even wider than this area. So if I create a line by laying this on its side, I can color with the entire side. Another aspect of this is I can get a perfectly clean and blended style where I don't see lines. Adjusting my pressure becomes much easier. I don't see individual shading lines where an amateur might color like this. You're going to be able to see this sawtooth pattern. That's the telltale sign of an amateur. So if I'm going to dive in and do this correctly, I want to make sure that I'm fully aware of what shape my pencil is. So first off, how do I guarantee I get a creamy and buttery smooth? I use the side, but that comes from how I hold the pencil. The standard way of creating line work would be using your hand muscles along with a little bit of your elbow, just like we're used to. So if I'm writing something, all that movement comes from my hands and finger muscle, okay? Now, if I'm shading, I can also create very delicate and straight lines using this. So if I'm using a pen or a pencil to create repeatable, controlled lines, this is a great technique. However, it's not very fast and effective for creating large lines. The farthest I can go with this line, let's take a look. I'm going to start up here, and then I'm going to go like this. Now the problem is it's straight up until about here, and then it starts curving around based on the movement of my hand. So how do I fix that? I start drawing from my elbow. So instead of doing a curved line, I can now pull, keep my hand in one spot, pull towards myself and use my entire arm to draw a straight line. Now, is it as easy to do from the side? Let's take a look. If I draw from the elbow here, you'll get a slight arching movement, but it's much straighter than this section down here. I've found that by pulling directly towards yourself and turning the paper to suit the job you need to do is the best way to create a straight line without needing a ruler. With that, we can experiment with other ways to hold the pencil, especially if we're going to be drawing with the side of it. I like to switch it up from the standard to what I call the number one. So if I take my hand and say, I'm number one, if I stick my pencil right here, rest there and close it up, I think of it kind of like a cigarette. Like Cruella de Vil, she needs to drop those ashes off. I can control with my pointer finger how much pressure I'm putting on the pencil at any given time, while using my whole arm to color in. So I like to play a game where I want to see how fast I can shade something in evenly. I'm going to play this game by creating a couple of random shapes. They want to be different sizes. Okay, I like to make them blobby or geometric, whatever you want. But I want you to practice shading in without creating any evidence of lines using the number one technique. So I'm gripping this. I've kind of choked up a little bit, but I have that pointer finger to adjust my piece. A lot of times I'll grab a scrap paper to practice and make sure that, notice how I started off as drawing on the tip. I'm going to make sure I get the right angle. I'm going to press down and I'm going to look for a flattened edge on the pencil. You can see that reflection. Now to play this game, I'm going to see how quickly I can color this in using a shading from my elbow. So I'm using quick, even strokes. I want to get the same even tone, but notice how big the strokes are. You can't see any individual one. I want to control my pressure, so it's a nice even tone. I obviously always start light so that I can add more if I need it darker. My elbow is floating freely, but I typically don't see much of that movement. You can see a few of the lines there. Let's try this last piece. Notice how quickly and free I can move. Okay, now that's a base coat, but let's say I want to add some 3D shading in an area like this. I'm going to add a little bit more pressure. And I can quickly fill in colors and massage it in using that flat side. I don't have to worry about it showing up as lines. I can do more detailed and subtle shading shifts. I can then go with the flow of a shape. I can turn the paper again. But notice that I'm using that same number one grip, using that ash flicking technique to control the pressure. Now, if I need to start getting darker, I can adjust my grip and start to control the more traditional shading technique, but I'm pressing a little bit harder, using a combination of my hand and finger muscles to build that up. And then to finish it off, I can press down. Notice I'm not afraid to move my paper the way that I need to. But let's take a look at my pencil tip now. From pressing down, I have this kind of wedge shape. And then on the other side is completely flat. Now at the tip here, I actually have a super sharp tip where I didn't even put it through a pencil sharpener. A lot of times you can get a sharper tip by drawing and flattening out an edge, so you're creating like almost like a blade-like surface. But that wears down pretty quickly. Notice that is the sharpest line we get, and this starts to dull down. If I want to sharpen the tip of my pencil through drawing, I can actually use that number 1 grip, hang it to the side, and I'm flattening it out with the paper, turn it slightly, and look closely at that and create a blade. And that's something that I can go straight back into, creating a perfectly thin line. And you're not going to get that with a pencil sharpener. Now, if you're having trouble and you don't want to waste all this wood, if you look at these pencil shavings, you see that there's a decent amount of lead stuck on the tip of those. So what I like to do is, if I'm getting low on the tip, you can see it on this one a little bit better. Instead of cutting away all that lead, I use an X-Acto to get a little bit closer. I'm just going to remove the wood just below here. I'm not cutting into any of the wood. And notice how I'm using this thumb right here to push the blade. It gives me a lot more control. I'm not trying to swing this at all. This isn't a good idea to shave your pencils over your drawing, but just so you guys can see. Now I have a plenty of lead to work with just by removing a small amount of wood, and I didn't waste any of that material. So layering these on becomes much easier. Adjusting my pressure or looking at how to blend colors together becomes the way that I build up the sensation of form in my drawings. Another thing you'll see me doing is changing the direction and rhythm of my strokes. So you might have noticed the back and forth. So we have kind of a zigzag pattern. So where it's connected like this. We have single direction where I'm lifting it up in between, where it'd be more like cross-hatching with a pen. Then we have the number 1 grip, is going to be smoother, but we can also use a circular motion. Now right here, these are disconnected and you can see that line. But if I flatten out the tip, so it's nice and flat, I can use that same thing to almost massage the color. It gets a more round quality that disguises any of the direction of my stroke. If I change the size, this is a great blunted way to add shading or any transitions and layers. So controlling the direction of my stroke, the rhythm of my stroke, and the shape of the tip of my pencil, I can create a wide variety of effects. Well, that just about does it. Hopefully you got a few helpful tips to help you take your drawings to the next level. If you like this video, please like and subscribe and stay tuned for more. Thanks again for watching Art with Mr. A.